The crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowded penthouse, casting dancing lights across marble floors that probably cost more than most people's houses. Victoria Ashford stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her diamond necklace catching the light every time she moved. She was talking to someone about stock portfolios, but her mind was elsewhere. Tonight's charity gala was supposed to be perfect. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. Then her phone buzzed. The pianist had canceled. Food poisoning, the text said. Victoria's jaw tightened. She had 200 guests arriving in less than an hour. And no music. This was exactly the kind of problem she hated. The kind that money should have prevented. She walked through her penthouse, heels clicking against the floor, trying to figure out what to do. The grand piano sat in the corner of the main room like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to bring it to life. She'd paid a fortune for that instrument, though she couldn't play a single note herself. It was more decoration than anything else, really. Something impressive for guests to admire. Mrs. Ashford? A quiet voice came from behind her. Victoria turned to see Rosa, her housekeeper, standing in the doorway. The woman had been with her for 8 years now, always punctual, always invisible in the way good help should be. Victoria barely looked up from her phone as she responded. "What is it, Rosa? I'm dealing with a crisis here." Rosa twisted her hands together, clearly nervous about interrupting. "I heard you talking about the piano player. My son, he can play. Very well, actually. He's played since he was little." Victoria finally looked at Rosa properly. The housekeeper was still wearing her uniform, ready to help serve tonight even though Victoria had told her she could go home early. Behind Rosa, Victoria could see a teenage boy standing awkwardly in the hallway. He was tall and thin, wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking completely out of place among the expensive furniture and artwork. "Your son plays piano?" Victoria's tone was skeptical. She glanced at the boy again, taking in his worn sneakers and the nervous way he kept his hands shoved in his pockets. "Yes, ma'am. Since he was 7. He's really very good." Victoria checked her watch. 50 minutes until guests arrived. What choice did she have? She sighed and waved her hand dismissively. "Fine, whatever. Tell him to play background music when people arrive. Nothing loud or attention-grabbing. Just pleasant sound to fill the space."
Can he do that?
Rosa's face lit up with relief. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you. Diego, come here." The boy walked into the room slowly, and Victoria got a better look at him now. He was 17, maybe 18. His clothes were clean but old, and he looked uncomfortable in every possible way. Good, Victoria thought. That meant he understood his place here. "You know how to play piano?" she asked him directly. "Yes, ma'am." His voice was quiet but steady. "Background music only. Classical pieces, nothing modern. Keep it soft. This is a fundraiser, not a concert. People need to be able to talk." She paused, looking him over once more. "Do you have something better to wear?" Diego glanced down at his clothes, then at his mother. Rosa jumped in quickly. "I can find him something, Mrs. Ashford. One of the servers' uniforms, maybe? Make it work." Victoria was already walking away, back to her phone and her growing list of last-minute problems. "And Rosa, make sure he understands this is simple background music. I don't need him showing off or drawing attention." 30 minutes later, Diego sat in a small bathroom off the kitchen, staring at himself in the mirror. Rosa had found him a white dress shirt from somewhere, though it was slightly too big and the sleeves were a bit long. He'd rolled them up to his elbows. His jeans would have to do. At least they were his best pair, the ones without any holes. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear exactly, but from something else. Excitement maybe, mixed with anger. He'd been playing piano since he was 7 years old, teaching himself from YouTube videos and library books. He'd practiced on his mother's old keyboard, the one with 3 broken keys that he'd learned to work around. He'd spent hundreds of hours at the piano in his high school music room, at least until they'd cut the music program last year due to budget problems. He'd applied to 3 music schools. All 3 had rejected him, not because he wasn't good enough, but because he wasn't good enough on paper. No formal training, no prestigious teachers, no competition wins. Just raw talent that nobody wanted to take a chance on. And now this wealthy woman, who lived in a penthouse that could fit his entire apartment building inside it, was treating him like he was some kind of party decoration. "Background music," she'd said. "Don't draw attention, Diego." His mother knocked softly on the door. "It's time." He stood up and opened the door. Rosa looked worried, the way she always did when she was trying to protect him from something. Just play nice and simple, okay? Don't make any trouble. This is good money for tonight, and Mrs. Ashford, she's been generous letting you come. I know, Mom. I mean it, baby. I know you're better than this. I know you deserve better, but tonight isn't about that. Tonight is about doing the job and going home, okay? Diego nodded, though something burned in his chest. His whole life had been about doing what was expected and staying quiet. About being grateful for scraps when he deserved a seat at the table. They walked through the kitchen where catering staff rushed around with trays of expensive food. Through the dining room where crystal glasses were arranged in perfect rows. And finally into the main room where that beautiful piano waited. It was a Steinway grand piano, black and glossy and worth more than his mother would earn in 5 years. Diego had never touched anything like it. The keyboards he practiced on had plastic keys that clicked and clacked. This instrument would feel completely different under his fingers. Victoria was across the room talking to some guests who had arrived early. She glanced over at him briefly, gave a small nod, then turned back to her conversation. That was it. No introduction, no encouragement. He was here to be invisible. Diego sat down at the piano bench and adjusted the height slightly. He could feel eyes on him, curious glances from wealthy people in expensive clothes who wondered who he was and why he was there. He recognized the look. It was the same look he got everywhere he went in neighborhoods like this, the look that asked, "Do you belong here?" His hands found the keys, and for just a moment everything else disappeared. The cold stares, his mother's worry, Victoria's dismissive attitude. It all faded away. There was only the piano and the music in his head, waiting to be released. He took a breath and began to play. Diego started with a Chopin nocturne. It was one of the first pieces he'd truly fallen in love with. Back when he was 13 and discovered classical music on a random YouTube video, he'd spent weeks learning it on his broken keyboard, imagining what it would sound like on a real piano. Now he knew. The Steinway responded to his touch like nothing he'd ever experienced. Each key had weight and depth. The sound filled the room in layers, rich and warm and alive. He forgot about the people around him. He forgot about his too big shirt and his anxiety. There was only the music. At first, nobody really noticed. The guests continued their conversations, champagne glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the high ceilings. This was exactly what Victoria wanted. Background noise, elevator music for rich people. But then something shifted. Diego moved from Chopin into Rachmaninoff, his fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. This piano could do things his keyboard never could. The dynamics, the subtle shifts in tone, the way the notes seemed to hang in the air before fading. He wasn't just playing anymore. He was having a conversation with the instrument, and it was answering back. A woman in a red dress was the first to stop talking. She was mid-sentence with her husband when the music caught her attention. She turned toward the piano, her eyes widening slightly. Then her husband stopped talking too. Then the couple next to them. Silence spread through the room like ripples in water. One by one, conversations died out. Guests turned to look at the teenager at the piano. This boy in the oversized shirt who was pulling emotions out of that instrument that some of them didn't even know they had. Victoria noticed the change in atmosphere before she understood what was causing it. She was talking to Richard Chen, a tech billionaire who'd promised a substantial donation tonight. When he suddenly wasn't listening anymore, his attention had drifted somewhere else entirely. "Who is that playing?" Richard asked, his voice almost a whisper. Victoria turned and felt a flash of irritation. The music was too loud, too present. Diego was supposed to fade into the background, not become the center of attention. She opened her mouth to say something dismissive, but the words died in her throat, because even she could hear it. Whatever Diego was playing now, it wasn't just technically good. It was beautiful, achingly beautiful. The kind of music that made you forget where you were and who you were supposed to be. Diego had moved past the classical pieces now and was improvising. He'd started weaving in jazz harmonies, blending them with the classical technique in a way that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. He looked completely transported, like he was somewhere else entirely. An older man with silver hair pushed through the crowd, moving closer to the piano. Victoria recognized him immediately. Vincent Porter, one of the most respected orchestra conductors in the country. He'd come tonight as a favor to a friend, clearly not expecting much from the evening. Now he stood transfixed, watching Diego's hands move across the keys. The piece Diego was creating built and built, layer upon layer of melody and harmony interweaving. It was joyful and sad at the same time, complex but somehow accessible. Some guests had tears in their eyes. Others were simply frozen, unable to look away. When Diego finally finished, his hands lifting slowly from the keys, the silence lasted for 3 full seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the applause started. It wasn't polite charity gala applause. It was real. People were on their feet, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Some were even shouting praise. Diego opened his eyes and the spell broke. Suddenly he was just a teenager again, overwhelmed and confused by the attention. His mother stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth. She was crying, Victoria noticed. Happy tears, probably, or maybe overwhelmed tears. It was hard to tell. Vincent Porter reached the piano first. He was a tall man with sharp features and the kind of presence that commanded attention, even in a room full of wealthy people. "Young man," he said, his accent carrying a hint of Eastern Europe. "Who taught you to play like that?" Diego stood up quickly, nearly knocking over the piano bench. Nobody really, sir. I taught myself mostly. YouTube videos, some library books. My mom got me a keyboard when I was little. YouTube videos. Vincent repeated the words like they were from a foreign language. "You're telling me you have no formal training?" "No, sir. I had a music teacher at school for a couple years, but she mainly taught choir. She let me use the piano in her room during lunch. But they cut the music program last year, so..." Vincent turned to look at Victoria, his expression intense. "Do you know what you have here? This boy is extraordinary. Raw, yes. Untrained in the formal sense. But the musicality, the emotional intelligence, the technical skill he's developed on his own." He shook his head in disbelief. "I've been teaching at conservatories for 30 years. I've seen students with every advantage. The best teachers money can buy, starting at age 3. Most of them will never play with the depth this young man just displayed." Victoria felt uncomfortable now. Everyone was looking at her, waiting for her response. She was supposed to be a patron of the arts. She donated to music programs and served on the board of 2 different cultural institutions. Her name was on a plaque at the Symphony Hall, for goodness sake. And yet her housekeeper's son, who'd been coming to this penthouse for years, had this extraordinary gift, and she'd never known. Never asked. Never cared enough to wonder. "I had no idea," she said, and the words sounded weak even to her own ears. Vincent wasn't letting it go. "What's your name, son?" Diego Reyes." "Diego, have you applied to music schools? Scholarships?" Diego glanced at his mother, then back at Vincent. "Yes, sir. 3 schools last year. I didn't get in." "You didn't get in," Vincent repeated slowly, and there was anger in his voice now. "Let me guess. They told you that you needed more formal training? That your resume wasn't competitive enough?" "Something like that, yes." Vincent pulled out his phone. "Give me your email address. I want you to come audition for my youth orchestra program. We have connections with several conservatories. If you play for them the way you just played here, they'd be fools not to accept you." Diego looked overwhelmed. "That's really generous, sir, but I don't know if I can. Programs like that, they cost money, right? And my mom, she already works 3 jobs just to keep us going. I have 2 younger sisters. I can't ask her to." "We have scholarships," Vincent interrupted. "Full scholarships for talented students who need financial support. That's not the issue." He paused. "But I will need a formal recommendation from someone of standing. Someone who can vouch for your character and potential." He turned to Victoria, and suddenly everyone was looking at her again. "Mrs. Ashford, surely you would be willing to write a letter of recommendation for Diego? You've known his family for years, after all." Victoria felt trapped. How could she say no in front of all these people? Her reputation as a philanthropist, her entire carefully constructed image, it all depended on moments like this. Saying yes was the only option. "Of course," she heard herself say. "I'd be happy to help." But even as she said the words, she felt something twist in her stomach. Because the truth was, she didn't know Diego at all. She'd never asked about him, never cared to learn anything about Rose's life outside of her work. And now she was going to write a recommendation for someone she'd dismissed completely just an hour ago. Diego was looking at her now, really looking at her for the first time. His expression was complicated. Grateful maybe, but also something else, something that looked almost like disappointment. "Thank you, Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly. "That's very kind of you. but the way he said it made Victoria wonder if kindness had anything to do with it at all. The party continued around them, but everything felt different now. Guests kept approaching Diego, asking him questions, complimenting his playing. He answered politely, but Victoria could see how uncomfortable he was. He kept pulling at his borrowed shirt sleeves, his eyes darting toward the kitchen where his mother had disappeared. Vincent Porter wasn't finished, though. He'd pulled Diego aside to a quieter corner of the room away from the crowd. Victoria watched them talking, saw the way Vincent was gesturing animatedly while Diego listened with wide eyes. She should have felt good about this. After all, wasn't this the kind of thing her charity work was supposed to accomplish? Helping talented young people achieve their dreams? But instead she felt something else. Guilt maybe, or shame. She couldn't quite name it. Richard Chen appeared at her elbow, champagne glass in hand. That was remarkable, Victoria. Where did you find him? He's Rose's son. My housekeeper. Richard raised his eyebrows. You've been hiding that talent in your own home? That's quite a discovery. I didn't know he could play, Victoria admitted. Not like that anyway. Well, you're doing the right thing now, helping him get into Vincent's program. That's what tonight is all about, isn't it? Supporting the arts, giving opportunities to deserving young people. Richard clinked his glass against hers. You should feel proud. But Victoria didn't feel proud. She felt like a fraud. Because the truth was, if the pianist hadn't canceled tonight, Diego would still be invisible to her. Just the housekeeper's kid, someone she passed in the hallway without a second thought. Across the room, Vincent was still talking to Diego. Now other guests had joined them, forming a small crowd around the teenager. Victoria caught fragments of their conversation. You must have practiced hours every day. What made you fall in love with classical music? Have you composed any original pieces? Diego answered each question with quiet humility, but Victoria noticed something in his posture. He stood straight, shoulders back, meeting people's eyes when he spoke. There was a dignity about him that she hadn't expected. Most people in his position would be falling over themselves with gratitude, eager to please, desperate to make a good impression. Diego was different. Grateful, yes, but not desperate. It was almost like he knew his own worth, regardless of whether anyone else recognized it. Rosa emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. She moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, the way she always did. But when she passed near Diego, their eyes met for just a moment. The look between them said everything. Pride, love, worry, hope, all mixed together. Victoria suddenly realized she'd never seen Rosa as a full person before. Just as someone who cleaned her house and organized her closets. She'd never thought about Rosa going home at night, helping Diego with homework, encouraging his music, working multiple jobs to keep their small family afloat. All those years, all that sacrifice happening completely outside of Victoria's awareness. Mrs. Ashford? Vincent had broken away from the group and was approaching her now. Might I have a word? They moved toward the windows, away from the noise. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights in the darkness. Victoria had always loved this view. It made her feel powerful, like she was above it all, looking down on the world. Tonight it just made her feel distant. Diego is exceptional, Vincent said without preamble. I want to be very clear about that. In my career I've maybe encountered 5 or 6 young people with his level of natural ability. Maybe. That's wonderful, Victoria said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Vincent studied her for a moment. But there's a problem. When I asked him about the recommendation letter, about the audition, he seemed hesitant. Almost like he doesn't want the opportunity. That doesn't make sense. Why would he turn down something like this? I was hoping you could tell me. You know his family, after all. Victoria felt that uncomfortable twist in her stomach again. Actually, I don't know them well. Rosa has worked for me for 8 years, but we've never really talked about personal things. I see. Vincent's tone was carefully neutral, but Victoria heard the judgment anyway. Well, I think the issue is practical. Diego mentioned his mother works multiple jobs. He has younger siblings. I got the sense that he feels responsible for helping support the family. Taking time for intensive music training, even with a scholarship, might feel selfish to him. But this is his future we're talking about. His talent could take him anywhere. Yes, Vincent agreed. But talent doesn't pay the rent. And it sounds like every dollar matters in their household. He paused. The scholarship would cover tuition and training, but it wouldn't replace the income Diego might earn working part-time jobs. It wouldn't help with his sister's needs or his mother's expenses. Victoria looked over at Diego again. He was alone now, standing near the piano, running his fingers gently along its polished surface. There was something wistful in his expression, like he was saying goodbye to something. What if... Victoria started, then stopped. What was she about to offer, and why? Was it genuine concern, or just an attempt to make herself feel better? Vincent waited patiently. What if I helped with the financial aspect? Victoria said slowly. Not as charity, but as an investment. In his talent. In his future. That would certainly remove a significant barrier, Vincent said carefully. But you'd need to discuss it with Diego and his mother. These things need to be handled with sensitivity. Pride matters, especially when people have been struggling on their own for so long. Pride. Yes, Victoria had seen that in Diego's face. That quiet dignity that refused to beg or grovel, even when opportunity was dangling right in front of him. The party was winding down now. Guests were starting to leave, offering their thanks and compliments. Several people made a point of telling Victoria how impressed they were with Diego's playing, how wonderful it was that she was supporting his talent. Each compliment felt like a tiny knife, because Victoria knew she didn't deserve the credit they were giving her. Finally, only a few guests remained. Vincent was gathering his things, and Diego had retreated to the kitchen, where his mother was helping the catering staff clean up. Victoria knew she needed to talk to them, but she found herself hesitating. What would she even say? She took a deep breath and walked toward the kitchen. Through the doorway, she could see Rosa and Diego talking quietly. Rosa's hand was on Diego's shoulder, and he was shaking his head about something. They looked worried. Victoria knocked softly on the doorframe. Both of them turned, and Rosa immediately straightened up, slipping back into her professional demeanor. Mrs. Ashford, did you need something? We're almost finished with the cleanup. Actually, I was hoping we could talk. All three of us. Victoria gestured toward the small breakfast nook off the kitchen. Please sit down. Rosa and Diego exchanged glances. They sat, but both of them looked uncomfortable, perched on the edge of the fancy chairs like they might need to jump up at any moment. Victoria sat across from them, suddenly unsure how to begin. She'd made million-dollar business deals without breaking a sweat. She'd negotiated with hedge fund managers and corporate executives. But this conversation felt harder than any of those. Diego, your playing tonight was extraordinary, she started. I'm sure Mr. Porter already told you this, but you have a genuine gift. Thank you, ma'am. Diego's voice was polite but guarded. He's offered you an incredible opportunity with his program. And I meant what I said about writing you a recommendation letter. Victoria paused. But I get the sense you're not sure about accepting. Is that true? Diego looked at his mother, then back at Victoria. It's complicated. Can you help me understand the complication? There was a long silence. Rosa spoke first, her voice quiet. Mrs. Ashford, you've been very generous. But Diego has responsibilities. We have responsibilities. Music school is wonderful, but it doesn't pay bills or feed his sisters. I work after school, Diego added, at a grocery store and sometimes doing tutoring. That money helps with rent, with groceries, with my sister's school supplies. If I'm spending 20 hours a week at orchestra practice and lessons, I can't work those jobs anymore. And I can't ask him to give up his future just to help me, Rosa said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But I also can't pretend we don't need that money. We're barely making it as it is. Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest. Here was the reality behind the beautiful music, behind the talent and the opportunity. A family trying to survive, making impossible choices between dreams and basic needs. What if, Victoria said slowly, we found a way to make both things possible? Diego looked at Victoria with those steady eyes of his, waiting. Rosa's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. I'd like to help, Victoria continued. Not just with the recommendation letter, but with the financial side of things. A proper salary increase for Rosa, and support for your family while Diego pursues his training. She expected gratitude, maybe relief. Instead, Diego's expression hardened slightly. That's very generous, Mrs. Ashford, he said, his voice careful and controlled. But I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't take it the wrong way. Victoria felt a flutter of unease. Go ahead. Why now? Diego leaned forward slightly. My mom has worked for you for 8 years. In all that time, did you ever ask about her life? About us? About whether we were struggling or needed help? Diego, Rosa said sharply, a warning in her voice, but Diego didn't stop. I've been playing piano since I was 7 years old. I've come to this building with my mom hundreds of times, waiting in the lobby while she worked. You've seen me. You've walked past me. But tonight was the first time you ever really looked at me, and that was only because you needed someone to play your piano. The words hung in the air like smoke. Victoria felt her face flush. Part of her wanted to get defensive, to remind this teenager who he was talking to point out that she was offering to help him now, which should be enough. But another part of her, a quieter part, knew he was absolutely right. You're right, she said finally, and the admission felt like something breaking loose inside her. You're completely right. I didn't see you. I didn't see your mother as anything beyond the person who cleaned my home. And that says something terrible about me. Rosa looked shocked. Diego's expression softened slightly, but he wasn't finished. So I need to know, he continued. Are you offering to help because you actually care about what happens to me and my family? Or are you doing it because Mr. Porter and all your rich friends were watching tonight, and it would look bad if you didn't? Diego, that's enough, Rosa said firmly, standing up. Mrs. Ashford is trying to do something kind, and you're being disrespectful. No, Victoria said, holding up her hand. Let him speak. He deserves to ask that question. Diego stood too, and suddenly he looked older than his 17 years. Tired, maybe. Or just worn down by a lifetime of being invisible to people like Victoria. I've spent my whole life watching people like you, he said. People who give money to charity galas and get their names on buildings, but who don't actually see the people right in front of them. People who care about helping the less fortunate as long as it's at a distance. As long as they don't have to actually know us or think about us as real people. Diego, please. Rosa's voice was desperate now. You're going to ruin everything. Ruin what, Mom? This opportunity? Diego's voice cracked slightly. This chance that's only happening because I was convenient? Because the real piano player got sick and Mrs. Ashford needed someone to fill in? He turned back to Victoria, and there were tears in his eyes now, though his voice stayed steady. I'm grateful for what you're offering, I really am. But I need to know it's real. Because I can't do this. I can't let my family count on your help if you're just going to forget about us the moment we're not convenient anymore. The moment we're not making you look good in front of your friends. The silence that followed was crushing. Victoria could hear her own heartbeat. She could see Rosa trembling, probably terrified that Diego had just destroyed their one chance at a better life. But Diego wasn't trembling. He stood there, shoulders back, looking Victoria straight in the eye, waiting for an honest answer. Victoria thought about all the charity boards she served on, all the donations she'd made, all the plaques with her name on them. She thought about how good those things made her feel, how they let her tell herself she was a good person, someone who made a difference. But had she ever actually made a difference? Or had she just been buying the appearance of goodness, keeping real people and real problems at arm's length? I don't know, she said finally, and the honesty of it surprised even her. I don't know if I'm doing this for the right reasons. I'd like to think I am, but you've made me question that. And maybe that's exactly what I needed. Diego's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his face. What I do know, Victoria continued, standing up now, is that you're right about everything you said. I didn't see you or your mother. I didn't care about your struggles or your dreams. And that was wrong. Deeply wrong. She paused, trying to find the right words. But I'm seeing you now, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to do better. Words are easy, Diego said quietly. Rich people are good at saying the right things. You're right about that too, Victoria agreed. So let me prove it with actions. Not just money, though that's part of it, but real involvement, real interest in your lives and your futures. She looked at Rosa. I want to know about your daughters, Diego's sisters. I want to know what they need, what their dreams are. I want to actually be part of this, not just write a check and feel good about myself. Rosa was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Mrs. Ashford, you don't have to. But what if I want to? Victoria interrupted gently. What if I'm tired of living in this perfect penthouse surrounded by expensive things and people who only care about money and status? What if I want something real in my life? Diego was still watching her carefully, but something in his stance had relaxed slightly. And if we say no? If we decide we don't want your help? Victoria felt a sharp pain in her chest at the thought, which surprised her. When had she started actually caring about what happened to this family? Then I'd respect that decision, she said. But I'd also be sad about it. Not because it would make me look bad, but because I think I need you as much as you might need my help. I think you've already taught me more in one night than I've learned in years. Diego looked at his mother. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind that only happens between people who've struggled together, who've had to rely on each other completely. Finally, Rosa spoke. Diego has always been too proud for his own good. He gets that from his father. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But pride doesn't feed children or pay for school. And sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. I'm not saying we accept, Diego said quickly. I'm just saying maybe we don't say no right away either. What would make you comfortable? Victoria asked. What would prove to you that this is real? Diego thought for a moment. Time and consistency. Don't just offer money and connections tonight when you're feeling guilty and everyone's watching. Show up. Be part of things. Prove that you actually care about what happens to us, not just how it makes you look. That's fair, Victoria said. More than fair, actually. And there's something else, Diego added. If I do this, if I accept Mr. Porter's offer and your help, I'm not doing it your way. I'm not giving up my jobs completely. I'm not abandoning my responsibilities. We figure out a balance that works for all of us, or it doesn't happen at all. Victoria found herself smiling for the first time all night, a real smile that came from somewhere genuine. You're going to be trouble, aren't you? Probably, Diego admitted, and the smallest hint of a smile crossed his face too. Good, Victoria said. I think I need some trouble in my life. I think I've been comfortable for too long. Rosa looked between them, hope and fear warring on her face. So what happens now? Now, Victoria said, we start small. Diego keeps his audition appointment with Vincent. I write that recommendation letter, but this time I actually put thought into it. I actually write about who Diego really is, not just what sounds impressive. She paused. And maybe the three of us sit down properly, not in my kitchen at midnight, and actually get to know each other. No more boss and employee, just people trying to figure something out together. Diego nodded slowly. Okay, we can try that. But I'm watching, he added, his voice firm again. And if this turns out to be just some rich person charity project, if you lose interest the moment it's not convenient anymore, I'm walking away. We're walking away, clear? Crystal clear, Victoria said. And Diego? Thank you. For what? For not letting me off easy? For demanding that I be better? I think that's exactly what I needed. 3 months passed before Victoria really understood what Diego had been trying to tell her that night. The first week after the gala, she'd been full of enthusiasm. She'd written the recommendation letter, sitting at her desk for hours to get it right. She'd researched music programs and scholarship opportunities. She'd even started reading about classical music, trying to understand the pieces Diego loved. But then her regular life crept back in. Business meetings, social obligations, another charity event. Days would go by where she wouldn't think about Diego or Rosa at all. And each time she remembered, she felt a stab of guilt that proved Diego's point exactly. She'd almost given up, almost convinced herself that she'd tried and failed, and that was that. But then Rosa had knocked on her office door one Tuesday afternoon looking nervous. Mrs. Ashford, Diego's audition with Mr. Porter is this Saturday. He wanted me to tell you that you're welcome to come if you want. But only if you actually want to, not because you feel obligated. Victoria had looked at her calendar, at the spa appointment and lunch reservation already scheduled. How easy it would be to send a nice text message wishing Diego luck. To stay comfortably in her own world. Instead, she'd canceled everything. The audition was held in a small rehearsal space in Midtown, nothing fancy or impressive. Just a room with a piano and some chairs. Vincent Porter was there, along with 2 other instructors from his program. Diego arrived with Rosa and his 2 younger sisters, Carmen and Lucia, both wide-eyed and unusually quiet. Victoria had brought coffee and donuts, then worried that was condescending, like she was trying too hard. But Lucia's face had lit up when she saw the donuts, and Carmen had whispered a shy thank you, and Victoria realized she was overthinking everything. Diego played for 45 minutes. He performed the required classical pieces, then some of his own improvisations. Victoria watched Vincent's face carefully. The conductor gave nothing away until Diego finished. Then Vincent had stood up, walked to Diego, and shaken his hand firmly. "Welcome to the program," he'd said simply. "We start next Monday," Rosa had cried. The girls had jumped up and down. Diego had just nodded, like he'd expected it all along, but Victoria saw his hands shaking when he stood up from the piano. That had been 2 months ago. Since then, Victoria had learned what it actually meant to be involved. Not just helpful from a distance, it meant sitting in on Diego's lessons sometimes, watching him work through difficult passages over and over until his fingers ached. It meant meeting Rosa for coffee every Thursday morning before work, actually talking about their lives. About Rosa's late husband and her struggles and her pride in her children. It meant having Carmen and Lucia over on Saturday afternoons, helping them with homework while Diego practiced. Victoria had never spent much time around children before. She'd always found them exhausting and unpredictable, but Lucia's endless questions about everything and Carmen's quiet observations had somehow worked their way into Victoria's heart. The money part had been tricky. Diego had refused direct payments, refused anything that felt like charity, so they'd structured it differently. Rosa's salary increased significantly, with proper benefits and retirement contributions. Diego worked part-time in Victoria's home office, helping organize her charitable foundation's records. It was real work that needed doing, and he was paid fairly for it. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, times when the gap between their worlds felt impossibly wide. Victoria still caught herself being thoughtless sometimes, making assumptions based on her privileged worldview. But each time it happened, Diego or Rosa would call her out on it, gently but firmly. And slowly, Victoria was learning to see the world through different eyes. Tonight was Diego's first public performance with Vincent's youth orchestra. They were playing at his old high school, the one that had cut the music program last year due to budget cuts. Vincent had chosen the location deliberately, wanting to show the community what they were missing, what they'd almost lost. Victoria arrived early and found a seat in the middle of the gymnasium. The folding chairs were uncomfortable, and the space smelled like old basketballs and floor wax. Her friends would have found it all terribly beneath them. 3 months ago, Victoria would have agreed. Now she looked around and saw something different. Families filling the seats, many of them speaking Spanish. Parents who'd worked all day and come here straight from their jobs. Kids in the crowd who looked like they wished the music program still existed, who missed having that outlet in their lives. Rosa sat 2 rows in front of Victoria, flanked by Carmen and Lucia. All 3 of them were dressed in their best clothes, and Victoria could see how Rosa kept smoothing down Lucia's hair, unable to sit still in her excitement. The orchestra filed out onto the temporary stage. Diego was third chair, his borrowed suit jacket a little too big in the shoulders. He was scanning the crowd, and when his eyes found his mother and sisters, his whole face softened. Then he saw Victoria, and he gave her a small nod. Not a bow, not excessive gratitude. Just acknowledgement that she'd shown up, like she'd promised. The performance was beautiful. The entire orchestra was talented, but even among skilled musicians, Diego stood out. During his solo passage, the gymnasium went completely silent. Victoria watched the faces around her, saw people leaning forward in their seats, saw kids who'd probably never heard classical music look transfixed. When the concert ended, the applause was thunderous. People were on their feet, and the orchestra looked genuinely moved by the response. This wasn't a fancy concert hall full of people who attended out of obligation. This was a community celebrating one of their own, reclaiming something they'd thought was lost. After the performance, there was a small reception in the school cafeteria. Victoria found herself standing with Rosa, watching Diego talk to a group of younger kids who were asking him questions about the piano. "He's good with them," Victoria observed. "He wants to teach someday," Rosa said. "Not at some fancy conservatory. Here, in neighborhoods like ours. He wants to find kids like he was, kids who have the talent but not the opportunity." "That sounds like Diego," Victoria said, smiling. Rosa turned to look at her directly. "Mrs. Ashford, can I ask you something?" "You can call me Victoria, you know." "I keep telling you that," Rosa smiled a little. "Old habits. But I wanted to ask, are you happy? With how things have turned out, I mean." With us being part of your life now? It was a vulnerable question, and Victoria understood why Rosa was asking. She wanted to know if this was sustainable. If Victoria was going to wake up one day and decide this experiment in crossing social boundaries was too much trouble. I'm happier than I've been in years, Victoria said honestly. My life before this was so empty, Rosa. I didn't even realize how empty until Diego called me out that night. I had money and status and all the things people think matter, but I didn't have anything real. She paused, watching Carmen and Lucia chase each other around the cafeteria tables. Now I have Thursday morning coffee with you. I have Carmen showing me her science projects and Lucia teaching me Spanish curse words she thinks I don't know are curse words. I have Diego texting me piano memes at midnight that I don't understand but laugh at anyway. Rosa's eyes were bright with tears. You've given us so much. No, Victoria said firmly. We've given each other something. That's what I'm finally starting to understand. This isn't me being charitable or generous. This is me being lucky enough that you let me into your family. Diego had broken away from the kids and was walking toward them, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. His hair was messy and his eyes were tired, but he was grinning in a way Victoria had never seen before. Did you see that? He asked, gesturing back toward the kids. 3 of them want to learn piano now, and 2 of them asked if I could teach them. Are you going to? Victoria asked. Maybe. I need to figure out the logistics, but yeah, I think so. He looked at her carefully. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. About your foundation? Okay, Victoria said cautiously. What if we started a real music program? Not just scholarships for kids who are already advanced, but actual access to instruments and lessons for kids who've never had the chance. Kids in schools where the programs got cut. That's a big undertaking, Victoria said, I know. But you have the resources and I have the knowledge of what these kids actually need. We could partner, really partner, not just you funding something I create. He paused. What do you think? Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, a sense of purpose she'd never experienced from any of her other charitable work. This wasn't about putting her name on a building or impressing her friends. This was about something real, something that mattered. I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time, she said. Let's do it. Diego smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no guardedness in it, no suspicion or doubt. Just genuine warmth and excitement about what they could build together. Rosa put her arm around Victoria's shoulders, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. Look at us, she said softly. Who would have thought? Not me, Victoria admitted. But I'm so glad I was wrong. Across the cafeteria, Carmen and Lucia had convinced some of the orchestra members to teach them a dance. Vincent Porter was laughing at something another parent said. Diego was already sketching out plans on a napkin, his mind racing ahead to all the possibilities, and Victoria stood there in a high school cafeteria, in her expensive dress among people in their everyday clothes, feeling more at home than she'd ever felt at any gala or charity event or society function. Because this was real. These people were real. The connections they were building were real. She'd spent years trying to buy meaning through donations and philanthropy. It turned out meaning couldn't be bought at all. It had to be built, person by person, relationship by relationship, through the hard work of actually seeing each other and choosing to stay. Diego had taught her that. A 17-year-old kid in borrowed clothes who'd had the courage to demand that she be better, that she do better. And somehow, against all odds and expectations, she had.